Good afternoon, I'm James Ezimoha and you're watching AnewZ. Let's see your headlines. 2 Israeli embassy staff shot dead outside a Jewish museum in the US. US President Donald Trump confronts South African president with claims of white persecution. Turkey, Iraq and Syria to form a joint mechanism for PKK-YPG disarmament. Thank you for joining us. A shooting outside a Jewish cultural event in Washington has left 2 Israeli diplomats dead, prompting swift international condemnation. The attack has sparked renewed commitments from both Israeli and US leaders to confront anti-Semitism and strengthen diplomatic security.
2 staff members from the Israeli embassy, Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lishinsky, a young couple soon to be engaged, were fatally shot by a lone gunman as they were leaving an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night. Authorities have confirmed that a suspect is now in custody. The shooting occurred in downtown D.C., just over a mile from the White House. Police quickly sealed off the area surrounding the museum as part of the investigation. Washington Metropolitan Police Chief Pamela Smith said the suspect, identified preliminarily as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez, reportedly chanted "Free Palestine" while in custody.
We believe the shooting was committed by a single suspect who is now in custody. Prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside of the museum. He approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun, and opened fire, striking both of our decedents. After the shooting, the suspect then entered the museum and was detained by event security. Once in handcuffs, the suspect identified where he discarded the weapon, and that weapon has been recovered, and he implied that he committed the offense.
Israel's ambassador to the US, Yechiel Later, said that the male victim had recently purchased an engagement ring and planned to propose the following week. The diplomat also said that US President Donald Trump personally called him after the attack.
On the way in, Ms. Bondi was kind enough to hand me the phone. On the other line was the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who told me that his administration is going to do everything it can possibly do to fight and end anti-Semitism.
Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to boost security at Israeli embassies worldwide after calling the Washington shooting a horrifying anti-Semitic murder and thanked President Trump for pledging justice and standing against anti-Semitism.
Tensions flared during South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's visit to the White House, where US President Donald Trump confronted him with footage of anti-white incitement in South Africa and announced a halt to US aid. Ramaphosa acknowledged the challenges and pledged deeper cooperation. Obai Shabanda has more from Washington, D.C.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa came to the White House on Wednesday to talk about improving ties and the bilateral relationship with the United States, which has been at times extremely tense. President Trump surprised the South African leader and in front of a packed room with the world's media in the Oval Office played a series of clips that showed the mass incitement against white African citizens of South Africa that have been organized by extremists seeking their extermination. President Trump has cut all foreign assistance to South Africa, and he's offered refuge to white Afrikaans in the U.S. in order to escape persecution. President Trump displayed footage of rallies in South Africa in which thousands were chanting, quote, "Kill the Boer," a reference to white Afrikaans, as well as an interview with a prominent South African political official widely viewed as inciting attacks against the African population in South Africa. On a different topic, on the African continent, President Ramaphosa thanked President Trump for the ongoing efforts by Washington to broker a peace deal in the conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo and neighboring Rwanda, a conflict that has killed and displaced thousands in a mineral-rich area. White farmers in South Africa have faced repeated attacks over the years, and many fear that their land will be forcibly appropriated. White House officials have said that they want to see the South African government do more to stop such attacks and to crack down on the incitement against white Afrikaans. After viewing the video that was showed to him by President Trump, President Ramaphosa said that the incitement in South Africa was being led by a small minority. President Trump pressed back, saying that more needs to be done to prevent mass killings. When pressed, Ramaphosa relented and said that South Africa faces significant criminality and that they need to work closer with the U.S. as a partner to confront such challenges. Trump reiterated that thousands of ethnic white Afrikaans are trying to immigrate to the U.S. because they feel that they will be killed in South Africa and have their land taken, that nothing is being done by the South African government to stop such attacks and activity. Clearly, this is an issue that the U.S. president is passionate about, as well as one of his key advisors, Elon Musk, who comes from South Africa. And this is an issue in which the U.S. government is putting significant pressure on South Africa. Further talks behind closed doors are expected to take place between the two leaders, hoping to resolve this issue. Mube Shabander, Washington, D.C., AnewZ.
Canada is looking at potential investments in the U.S. after President Donald Trump's proposed $175 billion Golden Dome missile defense shield. Prime Minister Mark Carney confirmed Canada's interest, but didn't specify potential financial contributions. Carney mentioned that he had discussed the concept of the Golden Dome a couple of times with the president. The project aims to counter potential missile threats from nations such as China and Russia. Russia has expressed serious concern over the U.S. Golden Dome missile defense system, a $175 billion project designed to protect against long-range missile threats. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the U.S. Golden Dome missile defense project is a serious concern, but there is no need to panic, noting that President Putin has assured Russia's missile systems can overcome any defense. He highlighted the advanced technology, urged stronger Russian security, and warned space-based interceptors threaten global stability. China says the Trump administration's plan to construct a so-called Golden Dome missile defense system is a threat to international security, accusing the U.S. of prompting an arms race. But what is the Golden Dome, and what does this mean for U.S.-China relations? Here's more details.
China is sounding the alarm. After years of developing its ballistic and hypersonic missile technology, Beijing now sees America's latest defense project, the Golden Dome, as a direct threat.
This is yet another America First initiative that puts the US's absolute security above all else. It violates the principle of undiminished security for all and will hurt global strategic balance and stability. China is gravely concerned.
Now he's a great senator from Indiana.
But in Washington, Donald Trump is undeterred. He's been unveiling a $175 billion plan for a multi-layered missile defense system aimed at countering threats, even those launched from space.
I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing.
The Golden Dome would rely on space-based sensors to detect and, if needed, intercept incoming missiles. The concept draws comparison to Israel's Iron Dome, also a US-funded defense system that identifies and intercepts rocket attacks. But Trump's version is more ambitious. For the US president, it's not just about protection. It's about completing a decades-old vision. He's reviving Ronald Reagan's 1980s dream of a space-based shield and giving it a $175 billion budget and a 3-year deadline.
Ronald Reagan wanted it many years ago, but they didn't have the technology. But it's something we're going to have. We're going to have it at the highest level.
As Washington builds up its shield and Beijing raises its voice, the question remains, will defense lead to deterrence or provoke a new era of escalation?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the war in Gaza will continue until Hamas is disarmed, its leadership expelled, and Israeli military control is established over Gaza. He also emphasized the implementation of the Trump plan as an essential requirement for ending hostilities.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out his conditions to end the war. In an hour-long press conference in Jerusalem, he said the war in Gaza will continue until Hamas is disarmed and the Palestinian enclave is under Israeli military control.
I am ready to end the war on clear terms that will ensure Israel's security. All the hostages return home, Hamas lays down its arms, steps down from power, its leadership is expelled from the Strip, meaning whoever remains of it, Gaza is completely disarmed, and we implement the Trump plan, a plan that is so correct and so revolutionary.
He said that he would only agree to a temporary truce to release the remaining hostages.
We have a very organized plan. We eliminated tens of thousands of terrorists, murderers. Our forces are capturing more and more territories to clear them of terrorists and Hamas's terror infrastructure. And at the end of this process, all of Gaza will be under Israeli security control and Hamas will be completely defeated. But it won't take a year and a half, I promise you, it won't. We are determined to complete the defeat of Hamas, release all our hostages, and bring a different future to Gaza. Otherwise, we will get it again and again and again.
He also added that 20 of the 58 hostages held in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023 are known to be alive, and Israel would employ military and political pressure together to bring them back. Meanwhile, Netanyahu has criticized the United Kingdom for its condemnation of Israel's handling of the war, the suspension of trade talks, and said that any intention to recognize a Palestinian state would be deemed a prize to terrorism. As the conflict continues, humanitarian conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate. Despite Israel allowing 100 aid trucks into the region on Wednesday, distribution challenges have left much of the population without essential supplies.
After weeks of mounting desperation in Gaza, a limited delivery of humanitarian aid has finally crossed the border. But for many Palestinians, the wait for critical supplies continues.
After an 11-week blockade, aid trucks carrying flour, baby food and medical supplies began arriving in Gaza this week. On Wednesday night, residents in Khan Yunis were seen unloading sacks of flour from one of the first trucks meant to supply local bakeries. Despite Israel only allowing 100 trucks to enter on Wednesday, United Nations officials say the aid hasn't yet reached the people who need it most. Markets remain bare, soup kitchens are shuttered, and bakeries are still waiting for promised supplies. The Israeli military says a total of 98 trucks entered on Monday and Tuesday, but the impact of the blockade continues to weigh heavily on Gazans, who are locked in an ever-deepening humanitarian crisis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his government is open to a temporary ceasefire, but only for the return of hostages. He vowed military operations will continue until Israel gains full control of Gaza. For now, aid workers say the limited deliveries are not enough and say that with every passing day, the need grows. Aid groups say they're ready to distribute supplies, but that safe access remains a major obstacle. Until that changes, millions in Gaza remain in a desperate situation.
Technical-level peace talks involving Russia and Ukraine could happen as early as next week at the Vatican. That's according to Finnish President Alexander Stubb. In an interview with Finnish media, Stubb said the discussions would likely include representatives from the US and Europe. He highlighted the EU's growing role in the peace process, saying this is what we've hoped for from the beginning. Earlier this week, US President Donald Trump spoke with European leaders, sharing details of his recent conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had some tough questions to answer at the Senate, where he defended the administration's policies and approach on a range of issues, including Russia and Ukraine. Joining us live from New York is Yulia Okonnell from Dignitas Fund. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Democrats have accused Trump's administration of not putting pressure on Russia by imposing more sanctions. If this is really the case, who now holds leverage over their counterpart?
Okay, so the accusation is not completely baseless because it's true. In the past 3 months, Putin gained some time while President Trump was thinking he can finish the war within 24 hours based on his personal relationship with Putin. That didn't happen, and yesterday and today was a hearing in Senate and Congress, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio was answering the questions from Democrats that the sanctions still has not been imposed. The truth is that Russia is adapting to the sanctions, and if you don't put the very deep and strategic sanctions, they always find a way to go around them. With that said, when Democrats pose that question, it's important to notice that in the past 3 years, Democratic Party and the Biden administration was providing Ukraine with the aid that was less in amount that even was declared and much lower. So that led to the situation we have right now. Was Ukraine given the more artillery in 2022, we would not be staying where we're today, where the war is a lot more technological with the help of drone, AI, and all kind of technological capabilities. So the question is absolutely fair. The good news is that Marco Rubio said that no previous sanctions were lifted, no military aid was stopped to Ukraine. He mentioned the European sanctions, strong European sanctions that with the shadow fleet Russia has, and that they use to export oil, and those are pretty strong with the oil production. So he mentioned that, and he said that President Putin knows very well if he doesn't put, kind of offer that is doable, that is more diplomatically negotiated on the table, that the sanction that Lindsey Graham is initiated will be most likely in place. And those sanctions are actually really strategic. Those sanctions they are on natural resources and on the banking system. So there is a lot of components to that. Having the pressure on Trump administration is good, because this is very clear time that Russia need, coming to the table. We have to come from the point of strength.
Now, according to Rubio, Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine, on the other hand, wants what they cannot regain militarily. What do you make of this statement?
It's a great statement because it's just so Marco Rubio actually kind of admits that it's a stalemate on the battlefield. What do we make out of it? We make out of it that Ukraine needs more support militarily, and sanctions is one of the part that would help Ukraine in diplomacy. To fight the war in the past 3 years against the nuclear state with population 4 times bigger than Ukraine has. I'm not even talking about the size of the country and the size of their military machine. And Ukraine is holding the ground in basically not letting Russia to move at the super high cost. It's we can tell that Ukraine is doing fantastic, is doing great. So what do we need? We need more military support from United States, more sanctions on Russia, and admitting that we need, there should be some diplomacy. Yes, Will it be a diplomacy? Will Putin put on the table anything that he already, anything doable? Because he always says he wants the territory he doesn't even own, 4 regions plus Crimea, full territory. He wants demilitarization of Ukraine, and he wants to lift in sanctions. So when he puts those demands, and most likely that's what he's going to do, how doable they are. They're most likely not acceptable, neither for Ukraine, nor for the United States, nor for Europe or alliances that are building around the split that happening right now in the world between the democratic world and those countries that support regimes like Chinese, Russian, North Korean, and Iran.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Finland is ramping up security along its eastern border, warning of a potential Russian troop buildup once the war in Ukraine ends. The development comes as Helsinki continues to bolster its border security with a new fence aimed at deterring hybrid threats.
Finland says it expects Russia to further build up troops along their shared border once the war in Ukraine ends, following reports that Moscow has recently reinforced its military bases near the NATO frontier. Amid rising tensions, Finland completed the first kilometres of a planned 200-kilometre fence along its border with Russia. The 4.5-metre-high barbed wire fence includes surveillance gear to help manage security risks and deter unauthorised crossings. Border officials say the fence became necessary after Finland accused Russia of deliberately sending migrants across the border in 2023.
This fence, based on the experiences by ourselves and other EU colleague states, we have understood that this is the best solution at the moment, and it is necessary to control the large masses of people if they are trying to, for example, violently enter Finland illegally.
It's a huge project nationally. If you think about the whole eastern border, we have the longest border of all the EU states with Russia, 1,340 kilometers. The fence will only encompass around 200 kilometers in total. However, 140 kilometers will be in southeast Finland. So the majority will be here, where in previous years there have been also more border incidents as well. So it's a higher risk area for us.
With migrant crossings nearly halted since Finland closed all border points with Russia in late 2023, construction of the 200-kilometre border fence continues. The project began after a spike in migration, which Helsinki believes Moscow deliberately orchestrated. In 2023, around 1,300 asylum seekers from countries like Syria and Somalia crossed into Finland through the Russian border, prompting the closure. Russia has denied involvement, while the European Court of Human Rights has asked Finland to justify the indefinite border shutdown.
France's prison crisis is deepening as prisons become overcrowded, housing tens of thousands more inmates than available cells. Authorities are now exploring extreme and controversial solutions, such as building high-security prisons in remote jungles and renting jail spaces abroad.
France's prison system is bursting at the seams. Data from December 2024 shows nearly 83,000 people incarcerated in facilities built for just over 62,000. According to the Council of Europe, France ranks third in Europe for prison overcrowding, behind only Cyprus and Romania. The severity of the crisis has led the government to explore extraordinary and radical solutions. President Emmanuel Macron suggested leasing prison space abroad. It is a strategy already tested by countries like Belgium and Denmark, which have housed inmates in the Netherlands. Estonia has also expressed interest in monetising its unused prison capacity. However, this concept faces legal, ethical and logistical challenges, with critics questioning the treatment of inmates held overseas. A recent Justice Ministry report proposed an exceptional one-time reduction of sentences for all inmates. This recommendation has stirred political controversy. Justice Minister Gérald Darmanin rejected the idea, instead pushing for rapid expansion. He promised 5,000 new prison places within 2 years and another 3,000 by 2027. Much of this capacity will come from modular units built off-site to save time and costs. Perhaps the most striking plan is unfolding thousands of kilometres away. In French Guiana, authorities announced plans to build a 500-bed high-security prison deep in the Amazon rainforest. Expected by 2028, the facility will house drug traffickers and offenders linked to the South American narcotics trade, aiming to strike at criminal networks at their source. As public frustration mounts, experts warn that it could encourage crime and harm public safety.
Turkey is leading a comprehensive disarmament initiative targeting the PKK terrorist group. This is in cooperation with both the central government of Iraq and the Kurdish regional government. Under the coordination of the Turkey's National Intelligence Organization, the process is gaining momentum across Iraq and Syria.
Turkey's National Intelligence Organization is leading a new plan to establish a joint mechanism aimed at overseeing the disarmament of the PKK terrorist group. The project involves setting up a joint system with the Iraqi central government and the Kurdistan regional government. Officials say talks with all sides have made good progress. The Turkish armed forces are directly engaged in supporting the operation, which spans multiple regions, including Baghdad, Erbil and Süleymaniye. Authorities say the goal is to find and shut down PKK hideouts, clear camps, locate hidden weapons, and make sure the group stops all armed activities. At the same time, Turkey is working with the Syrian government on a similar plan which targets the YPG terrorist group. Turkey says it's closely watching to see how Syria is pressuring the YPG to give up weapons and start political talks. The entire disarmament operation is expected to conclude by early September. Once the MIT confirms the full surrender of weapons through a final report, the Turkish parliament is scheduled to respond with a major legislative initiative. On the 1st of October, when the new legislative session begins, parliament is expected to create a National Unity Commission. This group will focus on national reconciliation. It will also help former PKK members who did not commit crimes return to society. Further democratic reforms and reconciliation steps will only begin after MIT confirms that disarmament is complete.
Despite the resurfacing of certain long-standing tensions during Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to Yerevan, both sides have confirmed that the allied relations remain in effect. Joining us to discuss this is John Kavulik, senior editor at Issue Insight. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Armenia's foreign minister has stated that Yerevan has no intention of reformatting its alliance with Moscow. How realistic is it for Armenia to pursue a pro-EU trajectory while remaining a treaty-bound ally of Russia?
It's a challenge. Minister Lavrov's visit yesterday was extraordinary in terms of the bluntness with which both he spoke, not only during the joint press conference with the foreign minister of Armenia, as well as the foreign minister of Armenia's blunt comments, but also at Minister Lavrov's visit to the university. And, they laid bare their differences. And Minister Lavrov was, he wasn't threatening, but he was, sort of laying down again some markers. And for Armenia, when, a third of its trade is with the Russian Federation, when it's surrounded by Georgia, primarily Christian nation, Azerbaijan, a primarily Muslim nation, Iran, a primarily Muslim nation, Turkey, a primarily Muslim nation. Its natural trading partners are somewhat problematic at the moment, but it was, it was a really interesting visit and what they said and how candidly they said it.
Now, what are the prospects for the Armenia-United States Strategic Partnership Charter signed by the outgoing Biden administration?
It should be the type of agreement that the Trump-Vance administration would be interested in, because Armenia, Christian nation, surrounded by Muslim nations. So generally, that triggers President Trump's interests, given his history with respect to Muslim nations. But he also is from that realist school. And so when he sees that Armenia is interested in expanding its relationship with the European Union, which is a good one, but you also simply have the geography. What do exports from Armenia need to do to get into the European Union, and then what do European Union exports need to traverse to get into Armenia? So for President Trump, I think he'll look at Armenia as, well, a nice small country. However, it does have a very vocal and politically powerful and financially well-to-do lobbying group in the United States, primarily in the state of California, which, even though is a Democratic state, it still is of interest to President Trump. So, I think that there'll be some interest there, but I'm not certain, if the president of Azerbaijan, the president of Turkey, if they say to President Trump, hey, this is really in our sphere, as the Russian government likes to talk about spheres of influence. Donald, why don't you sort of, leave this one alone? Nagorno-Karabakh, we're figuring that out. We'll re-engage and just sort of let us take this.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
An Azerbaijani delegation led by Azerbaijan's Deputy Foreign Minister and COP29 chief negotiator Yalcin Rafiev participated in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change during Climate Week in Panama City this week. During the high-level talks, Rafiev highlighted Azerbaijan's COP29 achievements, notably the Baku financial goal, which aims to mobilize $300 billion annually for developing countries by 2035, and the agreement on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement concerning carbon markets. The delegation held meetings with UNFCCC executives and Brazil's COP30 leadership to discuss COP29 outcomes and preparations for COP30. A personal exhibition by renowned Azerbaijani photographer Agdesh Bagizadeh has opened in Tbilisi, reinforcing the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Armenia. Georgia and Azerbaijan. Our correspondent Nino Nikolashvili has more.
Agdesh Bagizadeh's photography is widely recognized for its philosophical depth, and the latest series offers a real glimpse into her inner universe. From abstract patterns in nature to echoes of Sufi mysticism, My Other Side captures fleeting moments that often goes unnoticed. Urban shadows, architectural textures, and dreamlike reflections that speaks to a timeless world beyond the self. This project is a subjective illustration of the world as I see it, the artist explains. I find a great inspiration in the randomness of daily life, coexistence of natural and man-made elements that shape our existence. The exhibition does not only highlight artists' international career, which includes showing in Venice, Budapest, Paris, and Baku, but also reinforces the growing cultural dialogue between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Having previously exhibited in Tbilisi's Zurich Art Salon, Bagizadeh returned to Georgia with renewed artistic vision. This event stands as an important step in a creative exchange between two neighboring countries, reinforcing how mutual respect and shared heritage can foster growing cultural dialogue between two countries. The exhibition opened on May 21st, welcoming art lovers, diplomats, and cultural figures all alike. My other side will be on display until May 30. It's Nini Nikolashvili in Tbilisi, reporting for AnewZ.
A unique cultural event steeped in tradition was held in the Turkish capital to mark International Tea Day on Wednesday. Hosted by the Saudi Arabian ambassador to Turkey and his wife, the event, named Tea Journey in Asia and the Pacific, offered a vibrant celebration of the drink's heritage across the region. Take a look.
At the heart of Ankara, the residence of the Saudi Arabian ambassador to Turkey was transformed into a cultural hub on Wednesday to mark International Tea Day. Teas and cuisines from across Asia and the Pacific were showcased at the event titled The Tea Journey in Asia and the Pacific. Ambassador Fahad bin Assad Abu Al Nasser and his wife Rana Abdullah Bahamdan, who also serves as chair of the Ankara Asia Pacific Group, hosted the event.
A vibrant celebration of culture, heritage, and friendship through a simple yet profound tradition of tea. Today, we meet on the 21st of May, which is the Tea International Day and the UN. So, of course, we all know that with tea, we hold a lot of stories, rituals, connections that tea represents across our diverse nations.
The event aimed to highlight tea as more than just a beverage, saying it's a symbol of culture, identity, and unity.
Tea is one of the world's oldest, and after water, of course, the most consumed drink. Its story began over 5,000 years ago, and yet, from bustling markets to our quiet homes, tea continues to shape our daily lives with warmth and tradition. Every culture has its own way of enjoying the tea.
The event featured 21 national tea pavilions, each presenting its own traditional brewing methods, flavors, and ceremonies. Attendees had the chance to immerse themselves in authentic tea rituals, from interactive workshops and brewing demonstrations to captivating cultural performances. The program delivered a multi-sensory experience rooted in heritage and hospitality.
Whether in a tulip-shaped glass.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to AnewZ.